Hey guys, I'm Si. Welcome to A.C.E Podcast Nation, the home of the Danny Batten Fight Show. This is episode number 67. Tonight we are going to be talking last night's UFC, as well as chatting to not one but two special guests as we preview next week's Cage Warriors Trilogy card, and what 3 days worth of fights we have in store. It's going to be incredible, so really looking forward to talking about that in a bit of detail. As well as last night's controversial UFC card. There was a lot of controversy, but as usual, you can get this show and all the shows that we do on A.C.E Podcast Nation, youtube.com/A.C.E Podcast Nation if you want to watch it, or you can download the audio versions at all the usual podcast platforms and apps. A.C.E Podcast Nation, home to many great shows and series featuring top guests, expert analysts and more. Give us a follow on social media, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you want to keep it MMA and a little bit of boxing, then follow the Danny Batten Fight Show on Twitter and Instagram at Danny Batten FS on both. But with no further ado, let's get into it. Introducing first of all, my co-host as usual. He is a former Cage Warriors champion. He is a legend of the UK MMA scene, and it is Mr. Danny Batten. How goes it, my friend?
Oh, I just lost everyone there for a moment.
How are you, Danny? You alright, buddy?
Yeah. So I just lost everyone there for a moment. I don't know whether I froze up, but yeah, I'm all good side. We had an interesting weekend, didn't we? My goodness, antics and all sorts repeating themselves for this week. Yeah.
Cannot believe it. Twice, two weeks in a row. Unbelievable stuff. But we'll get into that. There was a few British fighters on last night's card, which is always good to have a look at how they're doing. And it would nearly a very, very good night for the British fighters. But we'll get to that in just a second. But I'm delighted to welcome our first guest of the day. It is none other than Cage Warriors commentator, the voice of Cage Warriors for gotta be 10 years. We were just discussing, but I think it's at least 10 years. I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Brad Wharton to the show. Welcome, Brad. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, thank you, guys. Glad to be here finally. I know we've been talking about this for a little while, so good to finally get on and chat to you boys.
Absolutely, mate. It's funny because obviously we spoke just before Christmas about you coming on and stuff, and where we've had different fighters on each week. And different coaches and stuff and I've said to a couple of the Cage Warriors guys, Brad Wharton's coming on soon, and universally every single fighter has spoke so highly of you and just said top bloke, great commentator, just full of praise. And that, I feel like that is quite unusual. Normally whoever it would be, you'd get someone who'll say, don't know what he's, don't like him, or he's a bit of an ass, or whatever it may be. But everybody that we spoke to, even right up to last week with Paddy Pimblett, it was top bloke. So we're looking forward to chatting to you, mate. And
it's because they know I can make up salacious rumours about them on air. So
that's it, isn't it?
They've got to keep on my good side. I could probably give you a list as long as my arm of people who think I'm an arsehole as well, but
Yeah, I think you could stitch them up, can't you? Instantly, on live TV.
Can and will.
Absolutely. So but I'm looking forward to talking about the trilogy because all of the trilogy shows have just been unbelievable, and I'd say even that one show where Mason won the title, the last one before the first lockdown, was a sensational Cage Warriors show, and I feel like the level of fights and professionalism, everything about all those shows since then to the present day has been world class, top tier stuff from Cage Warriors on every level, whether it be the production, the fights, the matchmaking, everything. Would you agree with that, you being there?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Obviously it's been a very weird situation, a very challenging situation, and the guys in the office that work with Graham and Ian to get these shows on, they don't get enough credit. The likes of me, I just turn up on fight week and I get to talk about fights, which is great, but the real hard work goes on behind the scenes. And look, there's no one else doing it, right? There's no one else in Europe doing this many shows, this volume, of this magnitude at the moment. So I think all credit to the Cage Warriors team in the office for getting this done and, you know, making sure that guys have these opportunities to compete in what's a really weird and, you know, pretty awful time for the sport.
That's what I mate. Couldn't say it better myself. I think just before we go into the fight by fight and have a look at the Cage Warriors cards, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about you, and how did you get into commentating? Basically, where did that come about?
So the first show I ever commentated on was a show run by a mate of mine up in Bolton. It was his very first show. It's called FCC, Full Contact Contender. Still going to this day. I think we're about 30 shows in now. I've done all but 2. When I was away with Cage Warriors on the same date. But Adam Tay runs it, a good friend of mine, and actually went to uni with one of my best friends. And he basically hooked me up with Adam because I wanted to do, at the time I was working as a journalist, and I wanted to write a piece about a grassroots show just starting up. So Adam kind of said, you know, come up, spend a couple of days with us and see how, you know, the setup goes and everything, and then you can write an article about the show. And then he realised about 2 days before that he forgot to put commentators. So he asked if I fancied doing it with my good friend Jez, who he went to uni with. And we got paid in I think a 12-pack of Stella, and the rest is history. You know, that was the first time I did it, and I'd never planned to do it, never set out to do it, but I really enjoyed it. And he said, "Look, next time we'll do it properly." So I actually, you know, did some research and this, that, and the other, and it kind of just took off from there. Just took every job that was offered, traipsed up and down the country. Commentate some great shows, lots of great shows. And then Cage Warriors hired me in 2012 to be like a backstage interviewer, make little promo videos, little mini documentary type things, and do pre and post fight interviews live at events. 2013, John Gooden obviously went to the UFC, and by that time I was doing a couple of hundred fights a year commentary wise on the regional circuit, and I got a Facebook message about 5 days before an event saying you're commentating. So that was that. And they've not got rid of me yet, so I guess they must be doing something like that.
No, I think you do a great job, and I think like your voice now is associated with Cage Warriors in a good way as well. And you know, over the years, Cage Warriors progressively, you know, as do sport generally, they progress and they evolve as times change, with, you know, over the years with HD and 4K and, or, you know, now 8K you're seeing in the UFC, and also, you know, everything gets bigger and better, I guess, and I think you're associated with that now, and I think that's like, when I say you're associated with it now, I don't mean you weren't before, but like you're the voice of Cage Warriors. Whenever anyone watches a clip or a knockout or something which has gone on, it's your voice which is there, and I think that's only a good thing. We did have a question sent in for you, and that was, and it kind of goes in with this sort of bit with the commentary, and it said, with Dan Hardy being released from the UFC last week, would you like to work alongside Dan for Cage Warriors commentating?
Yeah, man. Look, Dan is, for my money, probably the best analyst in the game at the moment. So to work alongside him would be fantastic. I don't know if anything's been announced or what yet, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be there next week.
Is it?
I'm assuming that will be in the sort of role that he had at Cage Warriors previously, where he sort of acted as like an on-screen analyst. So, you know, he opened the show with Layla and Graham and, you know, talked about the fights, and, you know, between fights kind of talked about, you know, what was coming up and how we saw certain bouts going. I'm assuming that's kind of what's going to be going on this time. But yeah, if I ever do get the opportunity to commentate with Dan, obviously I commentate with Dan Strauss at the moment, usually Josh Palmer, who's kind of stuck in America while the whole COVID situation is going on. I've been really lucky to commentate with some great guys. So the opportunity to commentate with Dan ever comes up, I'll be all for it.
Yeah, I think Danny, I think me and you agree with that. Like, Dan Hardy for me is one of the best. He was one of the best analysts the UFC had, which is why it was, you know, it was surprising to see him go. But they've obviously got such a long list of, you know, they've got some good analysts and they got some top analysts. but their list is never ending nonetheless, Danny, isn't it?
Yeah. I was really shocked just how good Dan was. He just melted into that role very, very well. I've known Dan for a long, long time. He was back on the circuit back when I was fighting. And, I used to get a different perspective of him. I used to see him in the warm-up rooms and, see him after the fights and what have you. But I would never have thought that he would make out to be such a good commentator as he ended up being. Really shows his IQ. His IQ and his ability for the visual, watch of the game, and then the way he puts it over to people is just incredible. He's so fluent and detailed, and he explains it really in layman terms as well. So even if you're relatively uneducated, he puts it over so well that even if you had your eyes shut, you'd paint a good picture of what's happening in any fight. And I'm really, really impressed. I'm really sad to see him leave the UFC, but with those kind of skills and attributes that he's got, I have no doubt that he'll be moving elsewhere and continue doing good things in the commentary business.
100%. Brad, what's your favourite fight that you've ever called, whether it be for Cage Warriors or anywhere else?
I've been really lucky, man. I've called some great ones. Sitting cage side at UFC London and doing the commentary for the BBC was pretty wild. I got to commentate on some fights with a few good friends of mine on that card, so that was pretty special. I commentated a great fight on the domestic circuit, an amateur contest between a guy called Ashley Reese, who's now in Bellator. I think he's maybe like 7-1, 7-2 or something as a professional now in Bellator. He fought a guy called Martin Chester, who at the time was one of the top amateur lightweights in the country. Put that fight into YouTube, Reese versus Chester. It's an absolute war. It's like the kind of fight that you probably wish that two young lads at amateur didn't have at the time. Like, they deserve to get paid a lot of money for the effort they put in that night. And that was probably the first like truly great fight that I ever called. In terms of like professional stuff and big time stuff on Cage Warriors, I think the Josh Reed versus Nathaniel Wood. That's one of the maddest Cage Warriors fights ever, one of the best one-round fights ever. And having the privilege to call that, there's a part during that fight where I just I pushed my chair back and stood up and went, "This is insane!" And it wasn't like pre-planned or anything. I kind of just lost it a bit, and I was like, "Holy fuck, this is absolutely mental." So that for me will always be up there. Joe McColgan versus Mehdi Ben Lakdar. I could probably sit here all day and list them, but it's all credit to Ian Dean for putting them together. Like he's the mastermind, right? I think if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have these opportunities.
Yeah, and I think like sort of circling back around to the trilogies, like it's not just been getting these cards on and getting the trilogies going and kind of just throwing a card together with a good main event. Like all of these fights have been really, really exciting to watch, or really, really interesting to watch. They've all got like a little bit of something, whether it's a little bit of niggle when you had Figlac versus Auburn Elliott, for instance, or you've got the quality, or you've got the excitement of Mason Jones going for a second title. But it's like every fight on the card, and this trilogy is no different. So like on the last trilogy, I think it was, just watching it, I found it really stressful because each day there was either people who I knew fighting or friends fighting or one of Danny's fighters fighting each day, and I found it so stressful. I was like, I can't watch this anymore. By the end of the second day, I can't watch this no more. But this time around, there is a few people in there who I either friends with or got personal relationship with or whatever. But it's a bit more spread out. So I'm hoping that I can enjoy this trilogy stress-free. He says Jordan's fighting in the main event on Saturday for the same title which Danny held, which is obviously the one which we want. We would like Jordan to pick up Danny if possible. But before I kind of go pick out some fights myself, Brad, is there any fights from the 3 days that you're like really looking forward to?
Oh man,
just like a one or two which I'd really like.
I could probably go through every night and pick a few out. Let me just take a quick look. I mean, here's one that's probably flying underneath the radar. Manny Akpan versus Ben Ellis on night one.
Yes.
Manny fighting out of SBG Manchester, a guy whose fights I've called for many years on the domestic circuit as an amateur, and I've called, I think, both of his pro fights as well. Really, really underrated guy. I don't know why more people aren't talking about this kid. He's absolutely mustard. Great striker, very, very fluid on the feet, but has a crazy submission game to back it up. And Ben Ellis, obviously, I don't know whether it's a nickname he wants or likes, but certainly a lot of his boys have been telling me that he goes by the moniker of the Welsh Khabib. So I think that tells you all you need to know about Ben. He's got a great personality, a great skill set, and I think he's got the kind of opposite skill set to Manny in this one. He's mostly known as a wrestler, so it's going to be very interesting to see how those guys meld together and what the outcome of that one's going to be.
Yeah, it's a big one because, like, we've had Ben on a few times, and like he's talked about that nickname and stuff, and he's talked about. I don't think it came from him necessarily. I think it's more, people around him, friends and stuff, because of that knockout from nothing, wasn't it? He was just on top of the guy, and God, almost in just a big forearm, but that's that fight I'm really looking forward to, and I was also it shows how stacked the card is, because I was almost surprised that was on the prelims and on that first night, but it just shows how stacked that card is, because on the prelims of the first night you've also got Josh Plant versus Matthias Figlac, and you've also got Lee Mitchell fighting Conor Hignett, which is like those three fights in years gone by. I do feel like they probably would have been on a main card, opening up shows and things like that.
Well, I think there's an argument that Matt Figlac should be in the welterweight tournament, right? A lot of people have said that. So. He's got a first round submission victory over Flaminas. Obviously, he's not as experienced as Flaminas, and he does have the loss to Ian Gary as well, which is why I assume he wasn't put in the tournament. But look, the nature of tournaments is that people win in the first round and get hurt, right? So if someone wins, if Ian Gary wins or Jack Grant wins or whoever wins and gets hurt, and Figlac gets another big stoppage victory in this contest, then all of a sudden, he's putting himself there in the alternate spot to fight for the title in June.
Absolutely. I cannot wait for that tournament, by the way. Me and Danny, in there during the first lockdown when there was no shows, we started reviewing the old UFC cards, and obviously the standard of or the technical standard of the fights kind of progresses through those early shows. But the one thing which is it's almost frightening to watch in some ways, Dan, and it's when you see the guys who are winning pull out of the next round because they've broken a hand on the other guy's skull, or they've picked up an injury. Because I think there was one where Dan Severin pulled out with a final or something like that, or the semi-final, through breaking his hand or something. And
Ken Shamrock at UFC 3 won his first two fights. Obviously, he turned up to that tournament to fight Hoist Gracie in what would have been a rematch. The whole show was promoted around that rematch. The poster had Ken and Hoist as the centerpiece. Hoist obviously ended up winning in the first round and then withdrawing himself. Ken had a broken hand, but didn't want to compete against a nobody and just pulled out. But that's like the drama of it. That's what made it great. And like, I don't know. I think some of the UFCs were, before guys could really fight, I felt that they were quite good fun. Seeing
very enjoyable.
Seeing some guy who billed himself as like a 260-0 Jeet Kune Do black belt, getting his whole world turned upside down by Mark Coleman or something. It's a pleasant sight to see, right?
Yeah, the groin strikes were legal, weren't they, in their first few, and
bring them back. I say bring them back.
Yeah, headbutts, and why not?
Headbutts to the groin.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do, Brad and Danny, before rather than go through every fight, I'm going to pick a few fights off each day which I like, and we'll talk about those in detail. Obviously, we just talked about Ben Ellis versus Manny Akpan. That was one of the ones I really wanted to talk about. Danny, let's get your view on that, and I'll get your predictions as well. Ben Ellis versus Manny Akpan. is a really interesting matchup. Bit of a clash in styles, but both on a bit of a tear lately, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
So which way do you see it going?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to be rooting for Ben Ellis. That's who I want to win, but it's not going to be straightforward. Because his style is so obvious, how you would think that he's going to go about getting the win. His camp are going to be well versed in bringing people in to do that kind of approach for his fight prep. So, they're going to be obviously anti-wrestling, going to be footworking away, and they're going to be punishing Ben for every entry that he tries to go for. So it's not going to be a straightforward thing. And that's the issue, really. They're starting on the feet. So, yeah, that's going to be an interesting conundrum that Ben Ellis has got to try to figure out. But I know that the camp he comes from are very, very good and very, very apt at coming up with game plans to find ways around issues and problems, like any good fight camp and good team should be able to do. So I'm going to stick with Ben Ellis on this one. I just think if he gets it down, he could really work some magic there.
Yeah, I'll go with Ben. He's a friend, and I can't bet against him. But Manny Akpan is by far the toughest opponent that Ben has come across yet, and it's going to be an interesting test for him. Brad, obviously you just talked about this fight, but let's get your prediction for it. Who do you think's going to take away the W?
Man, I would love to give a prediction. I can't do it. It's not really. I
know.
It's
I
kind
thought
of
I'd ask.
It's kind of a conflict of interest for me. I've got to be neutral, and it's tough, man, because there are guys fighting on these events next week who are good friends of mine, and
of course.
Part of my job is obviously to be professional from first bell to the last bell and call it down the middle. So I don't want to give a prediction, but what I will say is that I think the winner of this fight will be determined by the person who controls where the fight takes place, right? If Ben can get the takedowns and sit in the guard and pound away on Manny, it's going to be a bad night for Manny. If Manny can keep his distance, keep the range to his favour and strike from the outside, it's going to be a long night for Ben. So I think it's going to be a case of whoever can impose their will on the fight is going to get their hand raised.
Yeah, I think I agree with that completely, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, by the way.
That's fine, my friend.
Yes, you did.
I didn't think because you know what, I thought about it about 10 minutes ago. I thought I won't ask Brad for his predictions because it's a bit like put him on the spot, and then I could understand completely why you wouldn't and couldn't do it. And then without thinking, because I'm so used to going to Danny and then going to the other person I asked you. But anyway, I think what'll be interesting is with this fight. Lastly, as well, I just want to say is if it is, if Manny can keep his distance and they do stay on their feet, is how Ben's striking is on his feet, because he's never really had the chance to show just how good his striking is. So that will be and same with Manny. If it goes, goes to the floor, it'll be interesting to see how their skills are in those areas which are not necessarily their preferred areas to fight in. Okay, the opener of the main card, Stephen Hooper versus Mikael Figlac in the lightweight division. Another one which I'm very much looking forward to. Brad, what do you think of this fight generally?
Yeah, big fan of this one. Stephen Hooper, Clocky T, again, another guy I've known for a long time and called quite a few of his fights. He is scrappy as hell. Like, this guy will go and go and go, and he will drag you into bad spots. He's one of those guys where, every now and again it looks like he's in a really bad position and things aren't going his way, and he can turn it on a sixpence. So it'll be very interesting to see how he fares up against a guy like Mike Figlac. And look, we saw Figlac last time out get an absolutely brutal stoppage. Very, very high work rate in the first round. Came out for the first 15 seconds or whatever it was of the second round, looking like he might be taking his foot off the gas a little bit. And then all of a sudden, bam, and your man's out. So, very much looking forward to seeing Figlac back in there again. It's always the way when you get one of these undefeated guys. You want to see how far they can go and how long they can keep it. Hooper's not undefeated. He's got a few losses on the record as well, but he's faced a lot of very, very tough opposition. So I don't think his record's a clear indication of his level as a fighter. I think it's a very evenly matched bout.
Yeah, I think it's important for Mike Figlac to build on that defeat of Auburn, because that was like the battle of two undefeated fighters, both highly rated, and Michael Figlac came out on top, in a pretty one-sided victory. And I think it's important for him to then build again with an impressive performance against Steve Hooper. For me,
well, he's fought again since. He fought Anthony O'Connor since that on the last trilogy. I think he stopped Auburn late in the third round maybe. Yeah, he stopped O'Connor early in the second. So again for me, he built upon the performance against Auburn Elliott.
Yeah.
Of course, Auburn's had he's talked about some health problems that he had going into that fight.
Yes.
Pretty serious health problems, and there was a while that he didn't know if he was going to fight again or not. So obviously he's going to be back as well for the trilogy. I know he's had a late change of opponent that's not been announced yet. It's going to be announced. It's a really tasty fight as well. So keep an eye on the old Cage Warriors social media for that in a couple of days. But yeah, it's going to be great to see Auburn back in there. But for Figlac, he built upon that win against Auburn, against Anthony O'Connor last time. And I think if you can go out there and if you can do the same kind of thing to Hooper, well, then we're looking at a 5-0 guy who's going places, right?
Absolutely. Danny, excuse me, where do you see this one going, and who do you think's going to take it?
Yeah, I think Figlac's going to do it. I just think he's going to be too crisp. I know what Brad's saying about how scrappy Hooper is and stuff, but I just think that's going to present opportunities for Figlac to capitalise. I think he'll just play it smart and play it safe and waiting to capitalise on errors made. I just think it's all for him to win. I mean, but there are, we're talking about guys that are at that sort of level and that style of game where, on the given night, anything can happen, of course. But I just think if they're going to fight 10 times, my money's in the corner of Figlac more often out of those 10 sort of that time. So I'll go Figlac on this one.
Danny, do you think, just quickly, if Michael Figlac does take this in convincing fashion again, obviously, like Brad said, he stopped Auburn in just under 3 rounds.
Yeah.
He stopped Anthony O'Connor a bit quicker than that. If he does have another impressive victory, do you feel like he's got an argument to be in the lightweight title picture?
I don't know whether, just because what would that be? His third fight or something like that he would have had?
I think he's 5-0, Brad, he'd be, if he was to take this one.
Yeah, maybe one more to put himself in contention. I think there's possibly some other people banging around in the mix that have served their time, maybe to have cracks at the title. But he's certainly getting himself in position, right? Being unbeaten, and if he continues to be unbeaten, it's quite difficult to argue against the case. So if he carries on the way he is, he's certainly going to be there at some point this year.
Yeah, I was impressed. I was really impressed with him against Auburn. And then I've just watching the O'Connor fight back. He's an impressive fighter. I'm going to keep a close eye on him because I think he's going places. As you know, I was going to pick like a couple of fights and I was just looking to see which one I'm going to pick next. And I want to pick them all. So, Kieran Lister versus Decky McLennan. Brad, you'll correct me on any names. I'm terrible with names. Danny can't remember them and I can't pronounce them. So luckily we've got a professional with us who can sort us out. How do you see this fight developing, Brad?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one. Again, it's kind of the old grappler versus striker conversation. Kieran came in, a lot of hype behind him. Of course, he had an absolute tear up with Tom Mearns in his Cage Warriors debut, and then obviously, unfortunately, stopped by Joe McColgan. But there's no shame in losing to Joe McColgan, right? He's right up there in terms of this division in Cage Warriors. So it's a situation for Kieran where it's his first professional defeat. And the question is, how does he bounce back from that? How does a fighter recover mentally from getting their first professional loss on a big stage? Unfortunately for Kieran, he's going up against a very tough, gritty guy in Decky McLennan, who's a guy we've seen a couple of times on Cage Warriors, and we've seen on the regional circuit as well. Very, very good grappler. And Lister's got those long limbs that, just lend themselves to, occasionally getting triangled or armbarred. So, going to be an interesting chess match, I think, in this one. I think it's going to come down to whether, or how often Kieran is willing to commit in the exchanges. Does he risk going balls to the wall and getting taken down? So I think we're probably going to see, maybe a bit of a subdued and a dicey first few minutes, and then one of them's going to take a risk, and it's going to go either very well or very badly.
Indeed. Danny, how do you see this one developing? Who's going to win in your eyes?
Yeah, this was a tricky one to try and make a prediction on. But I'm going to go Kieran Lister. I just think, when I've seen him fight, he's got a fairly careful but solid approach in all areas, I would say. He's just very, very consistent everywhere. And he is pretty experienced now. He's had exposure to some big events, big shows. And having his first loss, it's just adding to that experience. Now, it does all depend on how he's going to bounce back from that. Is he going to start caging up more, or is he going to start going for it even more? It'd be interesting to see whether his style changes. I just think if he maintains the way that he has fought, which has got him all the wins, and keep his confidence, I think he can eke out a decision win. I just think he's pretty solid all round. I think that he's just growing with his experience. And I think having that loss should just pep him up even more to become even more solid, as long as he received that loss in a more positive way rather than it affecting him mentally. It really just boiled down to that. I mean, who knows? When you get your first loss, some people just lose belief in themselves. I think Kieran Lister's a pretty intelligent guy. I like the way he fights. To me, he's not someone that oversteps or takes too many risks. And I think, his opponent's kind of going to be wanting to take those opportunities for him to make a mistake. I don't think he makes many of them. So I'm going to stick with Kieran Lister on this one. I just think that's where I feel safest to put my money on.
Okay, mate. Before we move on to the sort of the main two fights of that day, I wanted to ask you, Brad, Scott Pedersen from Shore MMA is making his debut on the prelims versus Matthew Elliott. Do you know much about Scott, and what could you tell us about that fight?
Yeah, I mean, Scott's, he's been part of Cage Warriors a few times already. He's competed on the Cage Warriors Academy shows, and obviously he's got a lot of experience at the IMAFs. I think he's a 3-time IMAF guy, right? He's been to the Europeans and the Worlds, and you talk about like the importance of getting experience at amateur before you turn pro. Well, this guy's like on about 25, 26 fights or something ridiculous like that amateur. He's not one of these guys who's had a couple and then turned pro straight away. This guy's got a lot of experience. So, on the Welsh circuit, there's been a lot of talk about him turning pro for a long time, and very, very excited to see how he gets on. And he's fighting another guy who is a debutant with again, a fair bit of amateur experience, nowhere near as much, but he's a guy in Matthew Elliott who's been putting on some very, very one-sided performances against decent opposition at amateur as well. So, make no mistake about it, this isn't two novices going in there and finding their feet. This is two guys who've been through the ringer a couple of times. Very excited to see these guys getting the opportunity. I know for a lot of guys who are just making that turn to pro, there haven't been many opportunities in this past 12 months. So it's cool that Cage Warriors have got both these guys signed, and they've gone through the process. And what a way to make your debut. There's still not a lot of MMA going on, so there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this fight, and it's a great chance for one of these guys to make a big statement.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I'm really looking forward to that one, and it's going to be interesting because we've talked about a lot about the Welsh scene is strong in MMA at the moment. It's all over the place, whether it's pro and amateur. But we talked last week, Danny, with Paddy about the importance of the amateur record. And one of the things Paddy said towards the end of the show, I found really interesting. And he said, when you asked him about that and about what he would tell your students, was that stay amateur for as long as you can, get those amateur fights in. it really is important, isn't it? And I think we'll see that in this fight. In that, yes, it's two guys making their Cage Warriors sort of full debuts, but equally, they've both, like Brad has just said, very experienced fighters. That amateur record is important, isn't it? That amateur experience, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that's more available to fighters trying to grow their skill set today than it was back in my time. I think I had 3 amateur fights, and they was all in one day before I went pro. I just done an amateur tournament, and then there was left really nowhere else for me to go at the time. So, I would have loved to have been able to get some amateur experience in before turning pro. I mean, it was a different time back then, but I do have trouble with these youngsters that are barely out of their teens, having a handful of amateur fights. They do well in them and then think they're ready for the pro scene. And because you're trying to hold them back, suddenly they get a bit of attitude against you, and they start making whispers to other coaches how they're feeling that they're being held back. Oh, it's just an absolute nightmare. But sometimes you just got to let them go and trip up and make an example of them. But by the same token, you care about them, and you don't want them to have to go through.
The sport's in a position now where if you've got a guy like that, you can turn around and you can point at Jack Shaw, for example, and say, look, this guy has been with the same coach he's been with, obviously it's his dad, but he's been with the same coach he's been with since he was 15 years old. He's gone through the amateur ranks. He's gone through the IMAFs. He's gradually moved his weight up. He's gradually moved his experience up, and he's gradually moved his level of competition up. And you can point at that now. I think, maybe like 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, there wasn't that amateur bedrock that there is now. So I think as the years go on, we're not there yet, but as the years go on, these young guys are actually going to be able to see the value of staying at amateur, getting their experience, and realizing that it's not a race to the UFC. And that barrier to entry of the UFC is a lot lower now than it used to be. If you look at someone, just to use an example, Dan Hardy, he was like 16-4 when he got to the UFC, and he beat a couple of UFC veterans. There are guys in the UFC now who are 2-1. It's a different world, but that doesn't mean that you have to be the guy that's in there at 2-1, because what you don't see is guys getting there and then losing and getting cut and going back. That happens very rarely. So guys are going to start to see the value of saying, you know what, I'm going to do the Cage Warriors Academy, or I'm going to stay on the local circuit, or I'm going to do the IMAFs until I'm 25. Then I'll turn pro. There's no need to be an 18-year-old pro in this country unless you're one of those 1 in a million guys.
I mean, I like it. At the end of the day, everybody's journey or everybody's career, everybody's development is different, isn't it? And what works for, what's good for one person might not be good for another. Like you said there, Brad, there might be one guy or girl who's 18, 19 and turns pro and everything goes to plan and goes well. There might be another guy who maybe is more suited to staying on the amateurs till they're a bit later, because not just fighting and all this other things which come with it, but there's also people mature at different rates. I think you both agree, but I was a very different person when I was 18, 19 to when I was 25, 26. And when you add that in as well as developing as a fighter, I think there's an argument for what you're both saying, 100%. Brad, James Hendon versus Paul Hughes in the featherweight division is fascinating to me. It's the sort of co-main of the first day. Obviously, we're going to speak to Jordan in a minute, who's fighting for that featherweight title. But James Hendon and Paul Hughes is a hell of a fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a fight that was, Jordan versus Paul. One of the most fun fights that I've had the pleasure of commentating for a long, long time. Very, very close. A lot of drama, both within the 15 minutes and, of course, waiting for the decision and a split decision. And, I don't think anyone could really complain there. And maybe there wouldn't have been too many complaints if it had gone the other way either. I think it was that close. But it opens up a lot of possibilities for both these guys now. And obviously just keeping it to Paul and what he's doing next. Well, you've got to credit Paul, in my opinion. He could very rightly have said, look, I want a tune-up fight next. I want a get-right fight. He's only 6-1 himself, remember. but he wanted to fight the next big up and coming guy. Like James Hendon is a guy who, if you're into grappling in any way, you watch this guy fight, he's something special. Like I say, I get to commentate with Dan Strauss at the moment, and when I've got, I'm an old K1 guy. Like that's my kind of bedrock. I started off doing karate and Dutch kickboxing, that kind of stuff. So I get excited for all that. But when I turn around and in the middle of a James Hendon fight, and I'm seeing Dan Strauss like this, like you know this guy's got skills, right? He's an incredible grappler, and this is a dangerous fight for Paul Hughes to take. Like this
guy a really high level judo guy, isn't he?
Yes, yeah, he's I believe a junior national.
Right, yeah.
So very, very well credentialed and competition experience internationally. This is and when you consider as well, Hughes obviously a great, well-rounded skill set, and when we saw that against Aidan Stephen, but mainly known as a striker, it's a big gamble. He's rolling the dice here, and if he, if he comes up snake eyes, well, that's the possibility. But if he beats Hendon here, then he's making a huge statement.
Yeah, it would be a big. I think that's it, isn't it? It's a big. Does feel like I don't want to say a gamble, because obviously he believes in his team, believe in his ability. He's coming off the back of a loss to Jordan, but it was a hell of a fight. Really, really good fight. Danny, is it a risk, like if he was to lose to James Hendon? James Hendon's obviously quite skilled within the grappling areas. Even Paul Hughes is well-rounded, as Brad's just said. Is it a risk though? If James Hendon's to pick up the victory, Paul Hughes has then got back-to-back losses and.
Yeah, but I think him taking this fight just goes to show how confident he still is. Yeah. I don't think with that kind of performance that he had, whether the result went against Jordan or in whoever's favour, the way they both fought, it's done them both nothing but good. Everyone's watched that fight and seen positive things from each of them, and they all say that they're going to both have incredible careers. I think personally he's going to be too much for Hendon. I just think he's too complete. I do think he's going to have certain issues to deal with, but I just think Paul Hughes has got too many other skill sets to fall back on. He's so athletic and physically strong at the weight as well. I don't know. I'm still vouching for Hughes on this one. I just think he's going to be doing it. I think he's just the better, well-rounded fighter. And like I said, I think that experience with Jordan done nothing but improve his skill set. I just think it would have consolidated him even more. And I think he's just ready to get back there and get in contention. I think he would love to get his hands on Jordan again.
Yes.
That possibly might happen. The only issue I have with that sort of thing is that I think we all agree that people who are in contender for Cage Warriors titles and Cage Warriors title holders, they are UFC caliber. And I just don't like to see sort of European fighters cut each other's throats to try and get to UFC. Sometimes I would like to say, hey, let's put people like Jordan and Hughes in. It'd be nice if UFC signed up a couple of their top prospects sometimes. And then it really opens up the divisions as well. And you get another reshuffle and you start getting new stars. I think that we've got enough depth in each of the weight divisions to allow to progress two potential partners in each of the divisions that have shown supreme dominance over the rest of the field and get them into UFC, and let's reset things. Let's see Cage Warriors for what it does best, which I think it becomes a feeder show for UFC. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think Cage Warriors has done a fantastic job in supplying top talent to UFC. And I just think it's put it on the world stage and consolidated the Cage Warriors promotion in the position that they're in.
But what, and you're right, it's not a bad thing. And what they've done exceptionally well is every time they lose a big star to the UFC, they restock. And I don't mean they restock by they go out and sign, X, Y, and Z. What they do is the stars or the fighters who are just underneath those sort of title fighters, those number one contenders, they all improve and they all restock from within in that way. And it's beautiful to see as like when Modestas left, when I would think, and this is just me guessing, that well, even if you listened to him last week, Danny, Paddy Pimblett's probably not far from going to the UFC at some point. But other guys will come up underneath them and replace and come in and get the spotlight for themselves. And I like that. I love it, in fact. The main event of the first night is a middleweight bout between Jamie Richardson and Kent Kwapianen. We'll go to Brad. We'll go to Brad for the pronunciation and the preview.
Yeah, Kent Kauppinen. Kent, obviously well known on the scene. If you've been following UK MMA for any length of time, you've probably seen Kent fight at some point. Boxes a fair bit as well. Kind of fills that sort of domestic journeyman role as a boxer. When we say journeyman in terms of boxing, we mean something very different than in terms of how it's used in MMA. A good, proper journeyman boxer is a guy who will, take a future prospect the distance. They don't get stopped. They give them a good, 6, 8, 10 round boxing lesson. Obviously, you keep getting stopped, you lose your license. You can't fight the next month. So these guys tend to be very well developed defensive boxers. Look, Kent can bang as well, right? He loves to go in there and throw down. He's had some big fights at Bellator. He's fought Alessio Sakara, fought Melvin Manhoef. And there's no mystery in why he's been matched up with the likes of Alessio Sakara and Melvin Manhoef. It's because they know he'll stand in the middle of the cage and swing bombs. And he'll take a few and he'll give a few. And I don't think that's any mystery why he's been matched up with Jamie Richardson either, because we've all seen Jamie fight before and we all know he hits like a fucking mule and he will happily stand in the middle of the cage and take one to give one. So for me, obviously, I'm not entirely sure what the dealio is with Matthias Frederick at the moment, the champion. Obviously, he stopped Jamie last time. For my money, Jamie up on the scorecards in that one, put a very tight technical performance in, but got caught by an absolute monster in the Matthias. So while we kind of figure out, I guess, what's going on with Matthias, this is a great debut for Kent, and I wouldn't be too miffed to see the winner of this one fight for the title next, or maybe go on to fight James Webb, or who knows. But I think it's been put in this main event slot on the first day because it's kind of guaranteed fireworks, and who doesn't love a slugfest at the end of the day?
Yeah, I don't think this one's going to be a snooze fest by any means. It's going to be an absolute banger for me. I wouldn't be surprised if either man takes it, to be perfectly honest. Danny, who you got in this one, mate?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Jamie on this one. I really liked his performance against Matthias. Although Matthias, he was suffering with his footing, wasn't he, in the cage? Remember, he's slipping all over the place. Really had trouble. You got to wonder what he would have done if he could just get some grip on his feet so it launched those punches. I just think that really troubled him. And it'd be interesting to see how Matthias performs and see whether he can put that issue. I don't know what it was, whether he had something on his feet, whether his feet were dry, whether it was just the canvas on the night.
He had some water sprayed on his feet. So Cage Warriors normally use a vinyl. But for the first time, we had a canvas last time, so a bit more grip, obviously. Right. And Matthias' corner was spraying what I assume was water on the soles of his feet. So I don't know if maybe it's just the difference in friction between the canvas and the logos or something like that, or the fact that his feet were a bit too wet. Who knows?
I don't know, but it just, some other people weren't suffering at all, and he was suffering so bad. But to get back onto point, it is going to be an absolute banger, and it does make the fight hard to predict. But I'm just going to go Jamie Richardson. Other than the fact that he did get knocked out eventually, I think he was performing really, really good. And
he was doing very well.
Yeah, very, very well. And I'm going to go with Jamie Richardson on this one.
So to keep our predictions fun, Danny, I'm going to go with Kent, and I'm also going to go with James Hendon against Paul Hughes. I'm going to go with the prediction that his grappling and his clinch work might do the damage. On day 2, again, we could go through fight, but I'm conscious of time and everything. I do want to talk about Auburn Elliott's return to the cage. He had a health scare. He had his first loss. He's had a lot to deal with. He's moved up a weight, which I think suits him massively. Even, just from speaking to him, you could tell that straight away. Brad, first and foremost, just happy to see him back. But he's also a very, very talented fighter. So it's going to be interesting to see him at welterweight.
Yeah, very much so. The last thing you want to see is a young guy like Auburn be taken out of the game by something which is not his fault, something he has no control over. But obviously we have to take these health conditions seriously. And,
absolutely,
these guys are all going through the Safe MMA Plus process. It's very important. We know it's saved people's lives before. But he's done that. He's done everything that's been asked of him. He's gone through all these tests. He's fully fit, ready to go. Like you say, moving up to welterweight for the first time. I don't think the weight cut was doing any favors. Not a massively tall guy, but he is chunky, right? He's a well put together young man. His fight is actually going to be a bit north of welterweight because he's got a late notice opponent coming in. I think it's 177 pounds he's going to be fighting at. So I'm guessing what this means is that he's basically just not going to be cutting much weight at all, which again, in an ideal world, no one would be. Everyone would be just, getting a little bit trim. But, very much looking forward to seeing him in there. Very much looking forward to seeing him, put these health issues of the past year behind him. And look, he always walks out to Black Sabbath. So for my money, that's extra points, right?
Absolutely, 100%. Danny, what I want to move on to next, mate, is the welterweight tournament, which is on day 2 of the at the main card. Sorry, it's Jack Grant and Mardas Flaminas versus Rostam Akpan and Ian Gary. Just talk about that generally and how you see the tournament going, and then we'll get in also who you think is going to be in the final. And then we'll move to Brad for the preview.
So hard to make predictions on a tournament like this. Really, really hard. And then I think I've always liked watching Jack Grant. I just think he's going to be in the mix somewhere, somehow, in the mix. As for who else he could end up being up against, who knows? But I just think Jack Grant's going to be well relevant in this tournament. And it's just, I just don't know how else it'll turn out, to be honest.
Ian Gary.
When was the last time we had a knockout tournament done in one night like this? Has there been one recent?
So this one isn't one night. This one is the semi-finals are going to be on Friday, and the final will be in June.
Sorry.
So the previous one we had was at the BT Studios in end of 2019. And that was the bantamweight division. Jack Cartwright beat. Oh my goodness! Jack Cartwright beat the Croatian dude and Scott Malone. He beat Scott Malone in the semi-final, and oh my god, I forget the other guy's name. But he knocked both guys out in like 3 minutes combined. This thing. That was the last time we did a one-nighter. This one is going to be spread over this event and the next Trilogy in London in June.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to, Brad? Would you like to see more tournaments, like one-night tournaments?
Yeah, I mean, I started watching MMA. It wasn't called MMA when I started watching MMA. I started watching No Holds Barred and Vale Tudo in the late 90s, right? So I used to watch. I grew up in Holland, and I had a video shop guy in Holland who would sort me out with like 10th generation pirate copies of like Ukrainian 28-man, one night, no holds barred stuff. And that's kind of what I grew up on, watching guys like Igor Vovchanchin, and obviously then got hold of the early UFC events. So I love the tournament. I love the drama. And even in, modern MMA, obviously we're not doing no holds barred 8-man, one night jobs anymore, but even just the 1 night, 4-man, you have a 2-round semi-final with an overtime round if you need it, and then the 3-round final. For you're going to have a max of 5 rounds in most cases there. That to me is great. It creates storylines, it creates threads, and even splitting it over 2 nights. There's a bit of drama. Yes. Like, if Ian Gary wins and Jack Grant wins, then there's a lot of hype going into that. If Ian Gary wins and gets injured, does Figlac come in? There's a lot of stories that kind of build people up. And if you win one of these tournaments, it's not just the 2 wins on your record. There's a bit of a bit of build, a bit of hype, a bit of story behind it, and it can actually count for a little bit more. You're not just the guy who's the Cage Warriors champion. You're the guy who won the tournament. You beat everyone. So I'm all in favour of them. The more the merrier.
Yes, absolutely. You've got 2 title fights on that second day. You've got Sylvester Miller versus Jack Cartwright for the bantamweight title. Brad, talk us through this one.
Yeah, Cartwright's an absolute beast, right? He's probably the most terrifying small man that I know. I think I said last time he came out, he's the guy that gives Freddy Krueger nightmares. And every time he fights, he just does something else that's maybe a little bit unexpected. He won his title with 2 huge knockouts. He was the ranked outsider, the biggest betting underdog in that tournament. All 3 guys he fought in that tournament, all 3 guys who entered that tournament were former title challengers, and he steamed through it. He then got an incredibly one-sided decision over 5 rounds his next fight, and at the Trilogy last year, he came out and got a first-round submission without taking a single punch. One of the crazy things about Jack Cartwright is we've seen him be so violent and so brutal, but you talk to his training partners and they all say, yeah, but his wrestling is even more dangerous than his striking. So he's got a lot more to show us, I think. Sylvester Miller's going to be up against it. He's not competed at the same level as Jack, but he's got a very solid record. He's fought a lot of good guys on the Polish scene, but he's coming into this with no weight of expectation on him because everyone thinks Jack Grant is going to win this fight. The bookmakers have got Jack Cartwright as the favourite in this fight. All the pressure is on Jack Cartwright. If Sylvester Miller makes a good show of himself and doesn't win, so what? If he beats Jack Cartwright, all of a sudden he turns the bantamweight division on its head. So there's a lot to think about with this one.
Yeah, 100%. Danny, predictions: Sylvester Miller versus Jack Cartwright for the bantamweight title. Do you see Miller giving Cartwright any issues?
Yeah, I think Brad summed it up really. Miller's, you can just let it all hang out. He's got no expectations necessarily to be able to beat Jack, but Jack, to me, Cartwright's just been so incredibly dominant. He looks really strong at the weight. He's just really pressure-orientated fighter. Just doesn't really make many mistakes. He forces his opponents in mistake through pressure. So yeah, I just can't bet against the guy really. And I just think he's just too damn solid. I think it'll be a good performance. I think he'll push Cartwright to do more good things, but I just think that's what he's going to push to see. I think Miller's just going to create even better version of Cartwright, and he's just going to express more of his dominant game. And he's just so brutal. Just so brutal. And if anyone's going to go to UFC right now, I would say he's probably the strongest contender in Cage Warriors right now.
Yeah, he's a beast. I am a big fan. Even in our predictions, I still can't bring myself to go against him just for the fun of it. The main event of day 2, lightweight title fight between Donovan Desme and Arji Sadari. Brad, the preview of this one, I'm really looking forward to this fight. I'm so excited about this one.
Yeah, I mean, Sadari made his debut last time against Jack Grant, who is obviously in the welterweight tournament now, and he put on a complete performance. Right, he looked pretty solid all the way through. He's a pressure fighter. Didn't get the finish last time out, but we've seen him, knock out some tough guys. Got that traditional Dutch kickboxing style, but can go on the ground a bit as well, even though we didn't see a whole lot of that last time. Donovan Desme coming in late notice. Of course, Mehdi Ben Lakhdar was originally penciled in to fight for the title here. Donovan was a guy who's he's well liked among the Cage Warriors fans, right? There's been a big positive reaction on social media for this late replacement. He's had a few fights with us before. He's won a few, he's lost a few, but he was knocking on title contention back in 2019 when he last competed. So, he was scheduled to fight Paddy a few times. They had a bit of beef because the fight kept getting called off. They're now best buddies, so it looks like they're probably not going to fight each other at any point, which is a shame because that would have been pretty cool. But Donovan, he brings it. You look back at his fight with Hubert Heaven, a crazy one-round fight. They got stopped on a cut between the first and second round. He's a pressure fighter. He's going to go straight at Sadari. Sadari's going to go straight back at him. I'd really be wary about predicting a decision or a stoppage here, because both guys are tough as nails and both guys are finishers. So who knows?
Yeah, Danny, give me a prediction. I'm going to put you on the spot. It's a big one. Yeah, it's a difficult one.
It is a really difficult one. I'm going to go Sadari, but I don't feel comfortable sticking my neck out with either or on this one. But gut feeling, I'm going to go Sadari on this one.
I'll go Donovan Desme, absolutely, because got to go against you. The Saturday, the third day, is a ridiculous card from top to bottom. It is just sensational fights all the way from the first prelim to the main event. I'm gonna start with Tom Mearns versus Yassine Belhaj. Tom's had a couple of absolute bangers lately, and Danny, obviously you know it well as his coach. So I'm going to be interested to hear Brad's preview of this fight, and then also Danny, your opinion of the build-up and Tom's preparation and how you see it going. But Brad, you looking forward to this one, mate?
Yeah, I mean, look, Tom's never in a dull fight, right?
No.
You know, if you want to talk about a guy who's value for money, then you've got to talk about Tom. He always leaves everything on the line, leaves it all in the cage, win or lose. And, it's just one of those guys you love to see fight. Look, let's be honest, he needs to win, right? He's got to get a win here. He's probably now more than ever in terms of his Cage Warriors tenure. He's got to go out and put on a solid performance here. The guy he's facing is in a very, very similar position, Belhaj, because he kind of came in with a lot of hype behind him and ran into unfortunately Jack Grant, and no shame losing to Jack Grant. He's a top level guy, but he for a guy who's fairly unknown on the circuit, he's in the same position as Tom now. He needs a win. And when you've got a situation where both guys are really in the need of getting that W, putting one in the win column, and you've got two guys who are known for leaving it all on the line in the cage, it's going to be an entertaining fight. Is it going to be a case of Tom outboxing this guy? Is it going to be a case of Sadari getting the takedown? Who knows? It maybe could come down to who is mentally strongest, who's able to overcome that fear of getting that unwanted next defeat.
Yeah, I thought Tom was very unlucky in his last fight. I felt like he won, but such is life and such is MMA. Danny, how's Tom's preparation been, and how do you see this fight? Maybe some of the dangers that you feel his opponent brings.
Yeah, Tom Mearns can't sit on the outside with this guy. He's got some height advantage, reach advantage. I think he's got like a taekwondo background. So you don't want to stay on the ends of those kicks and punches. I think you have to pressure this guy. You have to squeeze him. I think Tom has to express some of his full MMA spectrum. So a bit of clinching, maybe even a potential for takedown. Tom's very good at pushing close and getting his hands working and keeping the pace and the pressure high at all times. If you remember when he fought Lister, he's done an excellent job. Bearing in mind, this guy really should be a featherweight. He's, because of the difficulty in his work life and such, he's choosing to fight at lightweight for a while, which is not something I've ever been comfortable with. And I keep expressing my disapproval of him being the lightweight.
You've never mentioned it, Dan. Never mentioned it.
I hate it. I don't like it. I think he's very effective featherweight. I know how effective he is at featherweight. I watch him and Jordan spar, really regularly. I know how good Tom potentially is. I just think he's going to shine in the featherweight division, not so much in the lightweights. But life gets in the way. Life other than being a fighter, you've got people running full-time jobs, and his one is a physical job. It's crazy hours, and it doesn't allow him to put the work into diet along with all the hard training and prep and strategy training that comes along with it. So he's choosing to fight a lightweight. Nevertheless, we've got this guy in front of us. I feel like we've got a good game plan. I don't think this guy is invincible by any stretch. There's a lot of holes in his game, and I think Tom's got the skill set and the mind to push into those areas, and I think he's going to eke out a win. I just think he's going to keep on stealing out rounds. In fact, I think he's going to put him under pressure and actually get a stoppage win here. I'm going to put my neck out and say that I think it's going to be a third round stoppage.
Excellent. It'd be very interesting because next week you're away, So I've got Tom's brother Richard joining me as filling in for you. So that'll be interesting. Depending on how the fight goes and how it is, it'd be interesting to get a bit of feedback. Last week's guest, Paddy the Baddie Pimblett, is making his return, his long-awaited return against David Martinez. Brad, Paddy was very impressive on that card that I mentioned earlier on, the last card before the first lockdown. How do you sort of see this fight progressing?
Well, I'm really happy, first of all, to see Paddy back in there. He's had a lot of issues with his hand in recent years. When he took on Soren back, that hand injury was niggling, and that was back in 2018. And he's seen so many bouts fall through because of either the hand not being healed or issues with his opponents. Obviously, he was supposed to fight Joe Giannetti a while back, and then he came in wildly overweight. He's just not had much luck. But then, he gets back in the cage against Decky Dalton, who was a late replacement for David, who he's supposed to be fighting on Saturday night. So he's had so much going on. But, he gets there against Dalton, who's a decent guy. Featherweight, naturally. He moved up and took that fight in a couple of weeks' notice. But Paddy looked phenomenal against him. The guy slipped early on and Paddy capitalised. Didn't give him any room to breathe, You'd think maybe with some guys, the nerves might have got to them and seeing their opponent slip, they might have been a bit hesitant whether to dive in or not. But Paddy was all business, took his back and got the submission. But he's obviously got tremendous upside. He's very marketable. He's got a big fan base. And we know he can go in the cage, right?
Yeah.
Paddy's in a position, though, where he can't lose anymore. He's had too much time out, and he's had, the kind of high-profile losses to the likes of Narimani, Soren back, etc. He's got to keep winning. I think he will probably be favoured by the bookmakers on Saturday night, and I think that's fair enough. His opponent, David, is a bit more of an unknown quantity. That's not to say that he doesn't pose a lot of problems for Paddy. I think in terms of the stand-up, he may be a little bit faster, a little bit crisper, a little bit more scrappy than Paddy on the feet, but Paddy's stand-up is improving all the time. So going to be very interesting to see what Paddy can do. He seems up for it. Like whenever I've seen him on social media or spoke to him in recent times, he's mentally seems in a great place. And look, he's kind of back where he belongs in a highlight position on a very big fight card on Cage Warriors.
Yeah, he was very confident, Danny, about facing David Martinez. How do you see this progressing? Do you see any way that Paddy doesn't win?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is MMA. So as much as there's many ways to win, there's many ways equally to lose at the end of the day. But the way Paddy was talking, he seems so confident in his ability, which he always has been. Don't get me wrong. But he seems to be sitting in a different place now. He was saying how he feels more stable with his life. He's got a house and things are more in place with his personal life. Yeah. And he feels that he's matured. He feels like he's reached manhood. And I think that caters for a lot. So I think we're going to see a really solid Paddy Pimblett. And I think he's probably going to get this guy out in the first couple of rounds. I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be a first round stoppage. I think he's going to put a showcase on to show how he's still absolutely relevant. He's hungry for UFC. He wants to get there, and I think he deserves to be there. He just maybe has had a couple of slip-ups in the past that Brad's mentioned. I think that has held him back from getting where he wants to get. But I think he's all for it now. I think now he's got stability in his personal life, along with feeling like he's matured and he feels ready. I don't know. It just sounds like he's just talking the right type of words that I want to hear from someone that's convincing me, not just because he's confident. He just seems to be talking a lot of common sense. I really liked his attitude. He kind of surprised me. I thought, from what I've seen of him, I kind of thought we was just going to get this brash, cocky. I suppose he wouldn't be too put down for me to say, but he wasn't. He was kind of classily cocky in a way where he was really backing it up with some really solid talk, and I feel really convinced by him. If he was a salesman, he would have sold me whatever it is he's trying to sell me. because he really convinced me, and I think he's going to put on a hell of a performance. I really do.
Well, as I've been saying to you for a while, Danny, what I like about Paddy is his honesty. But like you mentioned, he'll say something maybe which some people would, from the outside or whatever, would say is quite brash or a bit cocky. But he will then back it up with a reason, and his reasoning is quite often sound. With Paddy at the moment, I feel like everything is in place. Everything is in place for him to move to the next stage of his career, whatever that is. Admittedly, I haven't seen a great deal of David Martinez. I've seen a bit, but not loads. Nowhere near as much as I've seen as Paddy, for instance. But for me, I see Paddy taking this, and it'll be very interesting to see where Paddy goes after that if he picks up the victory, especially if it's a convincing one. I mean, if we're not sort of spreading rumours by any means, because Paddy said himself that he thinks he'll be in the UFC by the end of the year. He thinks he's going to wipe. He thinks he's going to wipe the floor with David Martinez and move on to the next. And he wants to fight a few times. So, last one now. Then before we get to the man we're going to talk about on, so it's Morgan Charrier in the main event versus Jordan Vucenic. I said it wrong after all the grief I've given you, Danny. For the featherweight title. Danny, this was the title which you held. Jordan is your student. He's fighting against Morgan Charrier, who's got a lot of hype behind him. He's a strong champion. We're obviously going to talk to Jordan about the fight now, but just for you as a coach, how do you see it going? And tell us a bit about Jordan's.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen what Jordan's about with the Paul Hughes fight that we touched on. He showed that he's well-rounded. He can adapt and change on the job. He can listen to the cornerman really well. When he fought Annable, he had to switch things up to retrieve back those rounds. He didn't start off as well as what I would have liked to have seen him start off. But he adapts on the job so well. He really does. And I just think as he matures as a fighter, he won't necessarily always have to make those amendments. I think he can start really well. I think he would have showcased himself even better against Paul Hughes if it wasn't for that fence grab that I can't help but mention. But there was a really decisive fence grab in the first round, and I think you would have seen Jordan maybe start running away with that fight a little bit more than what we saw. I think it made the fight look a whole lot closer, but I think with that taken into account, I think he would have had more of a convincing win. And so moving on to this, Morgan Charrier, I just think he's just a little bit better everywhere. I just think he's a little bit lighter framed, so I think he's got the speed advantage. I think he is going to have the better put together combinations. The thing that Morgan Charrier's got is just the outright brutal power. If Jordan was to make a mistake, it can be heavily and woefully punished. But Jordan's really got a mature head on his shoulders regards his MMA performance, and he's just, after that experience he had with Paul Hughes, his training's just gone to a whole new level. He just knows how to train himself. He knows which coach to go to at any one time. So he's been working with our boxing coach, Lee Edwards. He's been going to our K1 Thai coach, and they're all very well versed in what's needed for MMA. So he's really worked on his striking a hell of a lot. I've been working a lot on his wrestling, his wrestling defense, his changes, and it's all absolutely on point. All he has to do is just let it all play out on the night, and if he does so, I think he'll just be a little bit better all round, which is so similar to what I said about how I predicted the performance to be with Paul Hughes. I just think that it was just a little closer than what it should have been for the fact that they had that fence grab. I can't help but mention it, but it annoyed me.
Spot on, mate. I like it. Okay, Brad, finish us off with a little preview of the main event of the final night of the trilogy.
Yeah, obviously you guys are going to be speaking to young Jordan, so I don't want to say too much, but something that Jordan said to me at the last trilogy, which always kind of stuck with me, was he said, I'm from Corby, and when you're from Corby, you're either really good at one of two things, running away or fighting, and I don't own a pair of running shoes. And that kind of encapsulates the kind of fighter that Jordan is to me. He likes to get stuck in, and he will get stuck in against Morgan Charrier. Look, a lot of people say that, Morgan Charrier is like, the big star of Cage Warriors at the moment. And that's true, right? We've not seen the guy on the European scene with the kind of following that Morgan's got. He's more famous now than Conor McGregor was when McGregor's with Cage Warriors. His following on social media, and especially back home in France, is huge, right? And it's no secret that Cage Warriors are planning to go to France this year, and you've got to believe that it's in the plans for Morgan to be on that show somehow. But how much pressure is that on a young man's mind, knowing that, you know, that show might hinge on you winning this fight, and knowing that you've got, you know, not just a couple of hundred fans backing you, but you've got 100,000 fans backing you, and you've been interviewed on UFC Fight Pass, etc., etc. There's an argument that says that someone who's in Jordan's position right now isn't having to worry about the 100,000 fans, isn't having to worry about Instagram, isn't having to worry about Twitter and social media and all the other stuff that comes with it. All he's thinking about is punching this guy's head off. So there's two different ways of looking at it. And you know, I talked earlier about, you know, my love of narratives in fights, right? And the narratives that you get running through tournaments and things. I'm a bit of an anarchist. I like seeing the establishment upset. How good would it be if Jordan Vucenic could go in, smash Morgan Charrier in a round, and turn Cage Warriors' plans upside down? Because then all of a sudden, Morgan Charrier is looking at maybe defending that belt in France against Jordan Vucenic, and that's an entirely different dynamic. Maybe Jordan Vucenic wants to fight Paul Hughes next, and that's another different dynamic. So there's a lot going on in this fight for me. This is one of the Cage Warriors fights where I look at Ian Dean, I look at Graham, and I say, do you mind if I call in sick? Because I just want to watch it. I don't want to work. I want to sit in the front row. I want to have a beer, and I just want to watch these two guys throw down there. I'm not just saying that because you guys are speaking to him next and because Danny's here, but, you know, I talk about guys a lot that if you enjoy MMA, you can't not enjoy watching these guys fight. And for me, Jordan's one of those guys, and Morgan is also one of those guys. So there's no mistake why this is the main event of the last night of the trilogy. It's the biggest fight of the week. It's the biggest fight of the month. And it may be one of the biggest fights of the year for Cage Warriors, and I cannot wait to call it.
Yeah, it's going to be blinding. Brad, can I ask you two quick questions before you go?
You certainly can.
First question is, are you disappointed that we're not going to see Jake Hadley defend his title at this trilogy? Because we spoke to Jake, and he basically said there was no one out there worth fighting.
I mean, look, you know, there's a lot of guys that don't want to fight Jake at the moment. I know that fight's been offered to people. People turn it down. People are asking for ridiculous money. As well they might, because there's a good chance they're going to lose that fight, right? So we'll see. Obviously, Cage Warriors are looking to be back in London in June, and then France, and then California, and then Ireland, and then London again. So there's potentially lots going on. I'm sure if Jake hasn't got the call from the UFC by that time, Cage Warriors will have found an opponent for him. So, yeah, Gus said he's not going to be here this time, but I'm looking forward to the next one regardless.
Yeah, I'm hoping for one or the other, I've got to be honest, because he's a phenomenal fighter to watch. And the second question I'm going to ask to both of you, can you please give me your predictions for Stipe versus Francis Ngannou? Brad, you go first. Tell me a little bit about your prediction for that one and why you think that.
It's a tough one, man. You know, he got handled pretty handily last time. And have we seen anything from Ngannou that says he's improved in the areas that he needs to? Well, no, not really. But then he's not fought anyone who's going to test him in the way that Stipe is going to test him. Stipe is a slightly older guy, but for a heavyweight, he's still in his prime years. I just don't think we've seen anything from Ngannou that says he's a vastly different fighter than the guy that Stipe handled the first time. But we're talking about Francis Ngannou. If he lands one on your chin, it's a good night, Vienna. So who knows? My prediction: Stipe Miocic, 4th round TKO.
Danny, how do you see it going, and what's your prediction?
I'm going to go Ngannou by knockout. I think he's got 5 rounds to find the chin, and I just think he's going to find the chin this time around. I don't know. I've just got this weird gut feeling that he's just going to pull something out the bag and really upset a lot of people's expectations.
It's Francis Ngannou time. Look, these heavyweights are just, the power involved is crazy, and Ngannou's like a super heavyweight in that he's got even more power than the rest of them. For me, I'm going to go with Ngannou as well. I'm going to go with it. He finishes it within a couple of minutes. I just got a feeling like a Danny. But there we go. Brad, thank you ever so much for your time, mate. I really appreciate you giving us way over the half an hour which was planned. But really enjoyed breaking down all the Cage Warriors stuff and just previewing next week's show. Cannot wait to watch it and hear you commentate on it, mate. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate your time. And Danny, I'll see you in a few days, right?
Yes, no, absolutely, Brad. Thank you.
Take it easy, boys. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, mate.
Woo! Here we go.
There he is, the future champ.
Yeah, sorry, man. We ended up being a lot later than we planned. My God.
People like me don't wait around, mate.
Joining us is the number one contender for the Cage Warriors Featherweight title. He is fighting in the Trilogy on Saturday. So I'm delighted to welcome back Jordan, the epidemic Vucenic, to the show. Welcome back, buddy. How are you?
Hello. I'm all good.
Yeah.
Sexy.
Been sat
smile.
waiting there.
Look at them
for
teeth. Look.
hour and 25 minutes he's been waiting patiently. Just waiting for the call.
He would have been sat in front of a mirror the whole time while he waited.
Yeah, I was. Should I wear the hat? Should I let the hair flow with?
How are you, mate? You okay?
I'm all good.
Ready?
More than ready. Been ready forever. Let's get it done. Let's get that belt.
Well, I go back to last year, mate. The little interview we done, like a 20-minute one, when we told you was coming up to a fight or whatever, and we talked about it, and you said, this time next year, I will be featherweight champion of the world.
Yes.
And
I'm about to make
in
true.
about under a week, that is got the possibility of becoming
yeah.
true, mate. Yeah, I'm excited for you. I was saying to Danny and Brad just then, so the last trilogy I found really stressful because over the 3 days there was like 2 or 3 fights on each day where like I either was friends with someone or knew someone, and I found it really stressful, like watching all these guys fight, and I was just like, I can't cope with this. But I've just got your fight in the main event, Ben's fighting on the first day, so I've got a pretty nice stress-free, stressed at the start, stressed at the end. Hopefully it'll start with a Ben Ellis win on the first day and it'll finish with a Jordan Vucenic victory for the featherweight title. But does it mean more because your coach, Mr. Danny Batten, is a former Cage Warriors featherweight champion?
Yes, it does.
I know it means more to him.
Listen, I'm only winning that belt to say, Danny, I matched you, and now I'm going to go and do better. That's the whole reason.
Like
Listen,
it.
once I'm done that and I'm out of the game, I'm going to get into
As
soon
as he's got that featherweight title, he's going to change weight. He's going to go up a weight. Nah, I didn't want to fight a featherweight anyway.
I'm going to say, Danny, do you remember when you battered me in the gym that time, yeah? And then...
It's been a long time since anything like that's happened, though, isn't it?
I know. I still remember it, though. Jesus.
We were just talking about your fight with Paul Hughes on the last trilogy or the trilogy. Yeah, it was the last one, wasn't it? It was an exceptional fight, but Danny can't let go of the cage grab. He's not happy about it still.
Yeah, I know.
But in fairness, like it changed the way the fight would have gone from that point onwards. I think it's fair to say because you'd have taken him down, and then it's yours to.
He wouldn't have been able to get me off. That would have been what would have happened.
Well, I'm impartial, obviously, but yeah, that's what probably would have happened.
Yeah.
Was that frustrating? Was that frustrating at the time, though, mate? Like when he grabbed that cage?
Nah, I said this to JB and Lucas after. I couldn't tell because I was focused on lifting him up. So when I lifted him and tried to take him down, I thought to myself, how did I not get him down there? I didn't even know he grabbed the fence. I just thought he'd hit the switch on me and took me down. But Danny said a thing to me ages ago about being a tactician. I remember him speaking about GSP and how he was a tactician when he fought. And when he sort of said that, I thought that's how I need to be with fights. So I always have like a certain amount of things set in stone of what I want to do. And I told Danny before the fight that I was going to get in against the fence. I was going to get a high crotch, and I was going to be able to elevate him up in the air. And so I just thought that he had incredible balance, and somehow he ended up putting that switch on me. I didn't know he grabbed the fence at all. But it's the same thing. I've got a few things set for Charrier that they're going to come to fruition, and he ain't going to be able to stop them because they don't involve a fence, these things.
He's your opponent, Morgan Charrier. He's got a lot of hype behind him. It's fair, he's got a big following from France. According to Paddy last week, it's because of some YouTube thing or something that he did. But and what did he? I can't remember the word he used. He said it's something like it's fake following or something like that. He said, but he has got a lot of hype.
Yeah.
Is there a particular part of his game which you look at and you think, "Oh, I got to be wary of that," or is it all about the epidemic's plan for victory?
Yeah, it's all about the plan for victory. I'm telling you. I mean, look, he's got to where he's got, not through followers. He's got to where he's got from the fighting, but I'm the big dog, and I'm coming in, mate. And trust me, he's gonna. He ain't ever fought anybody on my level before, or he ain't ever beat anybody on my level before. He's fought probably guys on my level, but they've beat him.
Yeah, I'm gonna be fascinated to watch it, not just because it's you and whatnot, but I'm also interested in what plans, like what Danny likes a good plan, and he likes to plot for his fighters and come up with different strategies and stuff.
Yeah.
What's the preparation been like in the build up to this fight? Has it been quite like intense and not stressful, but like all work, or has it been quite relaxed? And
do you know what? It's been amazing, and in reference to Danny's training at the gym, it's I don't come to the gym for a horrible workout. I always come to learn Danny's techniques, and I come to put into practice everything that Danny showed and everything that he's taught. So I do all the hard work, all the graft, all the conditioning outside of the gym. I do it in my own time, and I think that's what you need to do to be a fighter. A lot of the guys in the gym rely on their sparring to get them fit, whereas I don't rely on that. I test my fitness in the sparring. But yeah, we've got some things set in stone, and because I've had, this will be my third fight back to back pretty much. It's been good because I've been able to see what works in camps in reference to training, dieting, everything, the way I weight cutted. So this time coming around, I've got rid of all the things that didn't work, and everything that worked, I've kept it. And like I said before, I've made it better. So I'm excited for this one. I've stayed bigger. I've kept my weight heavier, body fat low throughout this one. I've not got out of shape. I've been able to focus the whole camp on improving technically rather than having it a camp focused on losing weight. So
yeah, did you have any sort of injuries, aches, pains, or whatever after the Hughes fight that you had to get over, or was it a relatively clean bill of health after that?
Yeah, clean bill of health. I was probably more banged up after the aimable one, and that was only because when I threw a kick, I clipped his elbow. But I can't really complain with either of them. I've had no big injuries. There's been more injuries before them than there has been actually in the fight, in the training. Punching Tom Manns in his big head. That was one fight. But I've been perfect this one. I've been able to go the whole way through. Like I said, just improving and working the game, and I'm already at such a high level. It's I'm joking. That's been good.
But the thing is, though, mate, you're training day in, day out with like some very, very talented guys. You've got, Danny's an ex-champion himself. He's obviously a legend of the game. So
that's
you've got someone like that, helping you out, coaching you and stuff. But then you've also, you've got Tom Mearns, you've got Modestus, Richard Mearns, you've got all these different pro fighters to train with each day and test your skills and improve your skills. That's got to be beneficial for any fighter. But obviously, you're still, you're a very young man compared to myself and Danny. How is that for a young man like yourself, being able to train with and be coached by such high level guys daily?
Do you know what? It's everything, to be fair. Like I've been to plenty of other gyms, and our gym is just like a family. Especially there's the main group in the gym. I mean, everybody's always welcome, but our gym banters are not like everybody else's, so it takes a very special group of people to be in our banter. So yeah, it's wicked, and everybody pushes each other, and everybody's, especially our little group, it's a little group of fighters, and everybody always wants to one up each other. And you know, I'm training with sort of some of the top guys in the country, and Danny's watching us roll, like my little mate Haddy, and he's like, "Oh, Haddy, you're so shit." Obviously, he's getting destroyed by me.
I was going to say that a good, healthy dabbling of bullying going on in that gym, but it helps evolve these fighters and it gets them thick skin.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, if you think it is, but if you're going to get punched in the face for a living, you've got to have a bit of thick skin, haven't you? Let's be honest.
Yes. Well, a thick mind, some of them as well.
Yeah, well, it's no way to talk about your coach, is it? Jesus.
Oh,
Jesus. But
listen, his mind's many things, but thick ain't one of them.
Yeah.
But there's plenty wrong with it.
Is like any nerves coming into this fight now? Is there any part of you which is a bit like apprehensive or nervous just about the gravity of it all, or is it, you know, you seem very relaxed, you seem chilled out?
Do you know what? I know the work I've put in right from when I first started doing this up until now. When I've been at them points in training where I can't be asked being there and I want to go home, and I've always pushed past them points, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity. I said a long time ago that I wanted to win the Cage Warriors World title, and now it's coming around. I'm just grateful to get in there. I mean, you'll see me, I'll be smiling like a Cheshire cat when I'm in there before the fight started, because it's just all I want to do. It's just compete at the highest level, and I know where I'm destined to go. So I'm just happy to get in there, and I'm just happy to get that belt wrapped around my waist, and to test myself as well. That's the main thing, you know. I want to test myself against the best guys in the world, because I see the best guys in the world, and I really do watch them and think I could beat you. I watch them and think you're doing stuff wrong. I could definitely capitalise on what you're doing, and I just can't wait to go in and show it.
I like it, mate. I like it. I like the confidence. I like the belief. And of course, when you're holding that belt up on Saturday, you'll shout out A.C.E Podcast Nation.
Definitely going to be the sexiest champion they've ever had. The abs, the teeth.
Danny will be stood behind you, sort of going like this, trying to get in the camera.
Even my missus is shaking her head at that, but she knows. She knows she's pulled a weldie.
And she's a lucky girl. Let's be honest.
Exactly. Let's be honest.
A lucky girl.
Exactly.
Right then, mate. Before I let you go, because we have kept you waiting a long time, but you know, you got to wait for the best things, as they say, isn't it, mate? Exactly. I would like to know your predictions and who you think is going to win out of Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou.
I think my man Stipe, because we're both Serbian blooded, so I've got to go for big Stipe. I just think he's not even technically that great or anything, but I just think he's the smarter man when it comes to the fighting, and I think he's going to figure out a way to mix the wrestling and the striking to keep Ngannou from being able to do anything that he wants to do. Yeah,
like it. So that means me and Danny went for Ngannou. Yeah. Brad went for Stipe.
He's got that punch power, and he can't ever fault that. The HDR you go through.
He is a
bit
beast.
Like me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, got that power, mate, isn't he? It's like a sexy, powerful machine.
Exactly.
Like you.
Exactly.
Right there, Jordan, mate. It's a pleasure as always. Always a pleasure, and I hope we'll see you in a couple of weeks back on the show with the belt on your shoulder.
Exactly. And my gay following will be upped massively.
Massively, because what you'll do is you'll wear your belt, you'll wear your leather cap, but no hat, but no top. Exactly. And there we go. Yeah.
Exactly. I would have done it today, but I'm waterloading, so I look a bit fat.
Yeah.
But oh well.
Well, that's it. See, always thinking promotion.
Exactly.
Got to build these followings, mate. Appreciate your time, mate, and apologies again for keeping you waiting. But
I know it's Danny's fault. I know what he's like.
It's nothing to do with me.
Absolute nightmare.
I'm used to it.
He was late starting, couldn't shut him up. Jesus. Absolute nightmare. Right, you look after yourself, buddy, and I'll speak to you Saturday night when you're the champion of the world.
Exactly that.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Jordan Vucenic, Danny. What a guy.
Yeah, what a guy.
Can't wait for that fight. Cannot wait for that fight. It's going to be amazing. Right, mate, we're already 1 hour 40 in because we've been Cage Warriors heavy this evening. So no MMA news tonight, mate. What we'll do is we'll fly through the UFC from last night. Maybe it is a blessing that the two of the fights went to no contest. So we haven't, we're 2 fights less. I know I sent you a couple of prelim fights to talk about, so we'll keep it brief, mate. Anyway,
yeah,
but,
I think I watched all of them. I think I watched
JJ Aldrich versus Courtney Casey. I wanted to give a mention on the prelims because, quite frankly, I just thought it was a phenomenal fight. The women again putting on an absolute banger of a fight. What did you make of that one? Because
it was really hard to judge who was going to win that. It was really hard. I wouldn't have been surprised if it went the other way. Wouldn't have been surprised if it was a draw. There's a real difficult one. They both, performed well, but they also both showed where they need
holes
to
in their game.
Yeah. It wasn't a polished performance for both of them by any stretch, but they both showed that they've definitely got fighting pedigree in their blood. And they just need to carry on developing. They're on the world stage of UFC. That doesn't mean that you've got all your skill sets together and your strategies together. A couple of times we saw Aldrich make bad decisions, and we also saw Casey make bad decisions. At one point, almost jumping on the back of sort of jumping guard and put herself on her back. So I imagine they both had their coaches screaming in the corner with some of their choices. And, Aldrich allowed Casey up to her feet way too easily at one point. And, if I was in the corner, knowing that really she wanted it to be down on the ground, she needed to be on the ground. I think that's where she was being effective. It was kind of, I can imagine the coach's frustration watching her fight. Yeah. And that's the first ever groin strike I've seen in a women's match as well. A nice jumping back kick to the groin. Yeah.
But you know what was weird about that for me is like about 5 minutes before that groin strike, I was thinking, I wonder what would happen if if you have a groin strike, and I'm assuming it still hurts. And I was thinking it to myself just with my coffee, a little bit tired or whatever. It's just random stupid thoughts. And then it happened like literally straight after. I was like, oh, there you go. Now we know.
Yeah, she blinched. That hurt her.
Yeah. I thought both women did very well. I thought they showed enough to say that they could be two future stars for the women's division, which is good. We've talked about the need for depth in those divisions, and there's two girls I thought who did exceptionally well. Yes, they got holes in their game, but most fighters who aren't top tier at this time, they have got little things they need to work on. So that's not, that's by no means sort of a bad thing. Yeah,
I think it's too easy for us to judge other women on the performances that we have seen the women do, which has been absolutely incredible. I mean, the ones at the higher end of the division performed so incredibly. We must keep ourselves level-headed with it, and it was still a good fight. It was still good to watch. And you're right. They're going to progress. They've still got things to learn, but they're on the right tracks.
Spot on. And the other fight, interesting, you mentioned about the coaches screaming at them. The other fight I asked you to watch on the prelims was Nasrat Hakparsad versus Rafa Garcia. And I thought Nasrat, my God, he was impressive. But what was interesting is by the second round where he had pieced up Rafa Garcia a lot, Garcia was circling around, but he was circling around, I think it was to the right. So every time he circled to the right, he was going straight into Nasrat's left, which was where he was doing all the damage. And you could hear the coaches screaming at him, not right, left, because he kept circling right into this left hook. And it took him another couple of minutes to kind of realise, he means go the other way. but the damage was done by then. I mean, I was really impressed by Nasrat.
Yeah. No, he was really impressive. You got to remember, Garcia come in on short notice.
Yes,
so,
of course.
That's probably why you saw his footwork going around the wrong way. He's probably predominantly training with orthodox fighters, predominantly. And so we can't really blame him for that. It just wasn't in his game. So the coaches obviously had to be on his case at all times there. But, he come in at short notice. He's coming in unbeaten. So he's really putting himself on the line. But I think he performed really, really well. He made Hasrat have to fight back. And at one point, he rocked Hasrat. A couple of times it looked like he ruffled his feathers. But, what a performance from Hasrat. You're right. The thing I liked about him was he was using his hands and his kicks, but he never put it fully in. He just set them up really nice. And he just had enough pep. He sort of striking at about 80-85% of full delivery. And that made him be able to do it in big enough numbers, consistent enough numbers to look convincing enough in each of the rounds. And each round that went by, he started to get more and more dominant looking. It was really, really impressive. But, hats off to Garcia, really, for being such a tough opponent to allow him to look as good as he did. Because, like I say, not all times it went his own way. There were times he was on the receiving end. And Garcia was a good opponent at the end of the day.
And I think
he's definitely got a future.
The thing with Rafa Garcia as well is, well, number one, a lot of other fighters would have gone down to some of those shots. Shots he took on the chin, and he just kept going. And the other thing is, a lot of fighters who were unbeaten in the UFC wouldn't have put their unbeaten record up on 2 weeks' notice to fight someone who is already building a bit of a reputation for himself. What I really liked about Nasrat's performance was that left hand was doing the damage, but it wasn't just left hand. He was setting it up with kicks and punches to the body, and he would do it he'd set it up with a little right sort of hook to the ribs, and then when he'd done that a couple of times, he would mix it up by going with a left kick to the other side.
That's right.
He was very variable. And all it was doing is every time he would do it, Rafa Garcia was getting a bit discombobulated, but he was always able to land that left hand. Not always cleanly, but he was just, like you said, doing enough damage that he was comfortably, ticking along in each round. And I was impressed. I was impressed with both guys, but I was particularly impressed with the winner, Nasrat Haqparsat. I thought he was very... I'm going to really keep an eye out on where he goes next, but I will also be keeping a close eye on Rafa Garcia, because I thought he did very well. Moving to the main card, mate, we had all sorts of madness on this main card. It kicked off with Eric Anders versus Darren Stewart, the first Brit of the night to fight. It was a really, really enjoyable fight for the short time that it was. What was it? I think 4 minutes 37 of the first round before it went off. And then Darren Stewart's down, and Eric Anders just hits him with an illegal knee, exactly like we saw last week in the main event. The only difference being it didn't have the ferocity. What I didn't like is that it was a no contest and not a disqualification. Yet last week it was a disqualification. I do feel like the fact that it was less ferocious shouldn't mean that it, to me, the rules are whatever they are, and then if you break that rule and it's a fight ending thing, it should be the same for both fights. I know there's different little intricacies to it, but for me personally, I just feel like they should have been, whatever the decision is, whether it's a no contest or a disqualification, I feel like it should be the same for both fights. Don't know what you feel about that.
I'm not too sure what the reasoning was either.
So, the reason they gave was, one, it was earlier in the fight, so that's a very boxing-like thing. But basically, because this was in the first round and last week was, I think, in the fourth round, that makes a difference. And also, because the referee in the one last week told Petr Yan that the fighter was down, meaning that he shouldn't have taken the strike. But I would argue in that case, like, Petr Yan doesn't speak particularly great English. So can you, I don't know, it's a weird one. It's a tricky one, isn't it?
It is. But, we can only take the fight for what it was up until that point. And I felt that if the fight was going to go on, I feel like Stewart would have started to take over.
Yeah, I thought he would as well.
I think he would have had better endurance and just come in looking really big. But, that extra big size would have perhaps served him well in the first round and maybe partially the second. But you would think that if the pace get pushed on him, he would slow up somewhat. He must have done some weight cutting to get down. But, Anders did put some good pressure on. I was really surprised that he was so aggressive with the wrestling combinations, breaking free, striking Stewart. Stewart just didn't move his footwork. I think when Anders broke free to do those strikes, I would like to have seen Stewart had some urgency to just get off the fence, but he didn't. He chose to just trade back. It would have been nice for him to just footwork away, but he just wanted to stand and trade, and it made Anders look really good and really effective up until, of course, the dreaded illegal knee that we saw. I think the fight should have gone on. When the doctor come in, I was watching really closely on the doctor's reaction, and my criticism of Stewart was he just didn't act enough like, hey, I'm okay, just get me in there. He was staring at the at the doctor, waiting on his call. I would have been like, let's get the show on. I just would have been playing it differently. Like, hey, look, I don't even need the doctor in here. It's okay, I'm all good. But he didn't. He just didn't look urgent enough to have it continued. And I think his hesitancy to look so convincing that he was okay made the doctor call it off.
It was strange, wasn't it? Because he was saying, I don't want to call it off, but he was very slow to his feet, and
he's very confident. I don't think he was hurt by any stretch. I really don't. But
if he's not, look, to me though, Dan, if he's not hurt, he should jump to his feet and make it very clear to the referee, to the doctor, I'm ready to go. Take a point or whatever you're going to do, but I'm good to go. But by being really slow and taking his time, and when they asked him a question, do you want to keep going, he didn't reply straight away. That creates this thing where the doctor's not going to take a risk. The doctor will never take a risk in that situation. So if you have to be, I'm ready to go, come on, let's go, let's finish it, let's get this fight back on. Do you know what I mean? Like, ref is never going to just accept lethargic even. So I'm really frustrated because I really want to see Stewart put it on him in the second and third round, because that's what I felt was going to happen. But we never got to see it. So really frustrating. It is, mate. It is.
I hope they run that fight back though, because I think that's a good matchup for the pair of them.
Yeah, I think they'll run those both back. I think, although I will discuss the other one in a minute. Next up was Matheus Nicolau versus Manuel Kepe. A split decision victory for Matheus Nicolau. What did you make of this one, mate? This is the only fight I haven't seen, so you'll have to leave this one.
Okay, Kepe looked good. He looked pretty good all the way through. It looked like he was the one that was the stalking guy regards the striking. Nicolau was looking to use his striking to enter for the takedown. He did get a little bit of success with the takedowns, but not in all the rounds. And he started to look like he was getting his feathers fluttered a little bit by Kepe. Kepe looked like he was taking over at one point, but then Nicolau started using his hands more in that third round. Actually got quite a bit of success off. It's almost like he didn't believe in his striking a bit. He looked a bit nervous and sensitive on the feet. He looked just too desperate to get into the ground at times. It was making it a little bit obvious. And Kepe started getting wise to it. But in that third round, when he started coming on strong with the hands, I think it was surprising Kepe a little bit. But I really thought Kepe was going to get the decision nod, although it is one of those ones that was close enough where perhaps it could have gone the other way. Because like I say, Nicolau was getting some hands on Kepe in that third round. But Kepe looked really disappointed that when the decision went against him, he kind of looked a little bit in disbelief. But he was pretty impressive, to be honest. And it looks like he had developed somewhat from the last time that we had seen him. So, definitely moving in the right direction. Just a shame that result went against him, but you leave it into the judges being close like that, it could go against you. And with the look of expression on his face, he felt he did enough, but the judges didn't, unfortunately. It's the judges' ones that count.
Yeah, the judges, the ones that matter, mate, unfortunately. Next up was the second Brit of the night, and that was Davy Grant versus Jonathan Martinez. Davy Grant did it again in the same way in the second round, 3 minutes in. And I thought he looked okay, but he didn't look the best up to this point. But all of a sudden, in that last couple of minutes of the fight, he really got it together, and oh boy, what a knockout.
Yeah, wasn't it a knockout? I think he was doing really well in the very first part of the match. He was doing really, really well. And then Martinez started to find his shots a little bit. But of course, in some of those exchanges, there was a little bit tit for tatty. But in those exchanges, we know Martinez has got some power and some dynamite in his hands. He floors Grant. And it looked like it possibly could have been stopped at some point. I saw the ref really looking closely.
Yeah, there was one little point, wasn't there, where it looked
like
there
was. And I was like, it's really like, no, not now. Keep things about you. But he survived it. And we've seen it before with Grant, but he just seems to get it done somehow, some way. I like the way he throws out really diverse shots. And maybe that's how he got it in the end. The fact that he does throw kicks up the middle, he throws some round kicks, he throws loopy punches, straight punches. He is kind of dynamic without being overly flamboyant. And so he's dynamic in his striking is quite subtle. We even tried a reverse heel kick at one point. And I think maybe he kept Martinez guessing enough on what was coming until a point where he just didn't see that. I think it was a cross punch, wasn't it? I think he briefly went into southpaw, I think possibly at the time, and landed in that crosshand that put Martinez on his ass, and it was game over very, very quickly. Great win for Grant, it really is. He's 35, so he has to try and keep this momentum going, but he's doing all the right things. He's getting wins.
Spot on, mate. Couldn't have said it better myself. It's another impressive knockout, and on that note of impressive knockouts, Dan Eag, the ranked 9 fighter.
Yes.
Knocked out Gavin Tucker in 22 seconds, and oh my days, was it a knockout?
Yeah.
Tell me about it, mate. Tell me about it.
There's not a lot to say other than it was on the front of the chin. There was nothing hooky about it. It was
the button.
Yeah, right on the chin. So it dropped his jaw open. He fell down, and you could just tell he was in trouble from the get-go. And the ref jumped in really, really quick, which was nice to see, because so many times we see people get knocked down like that, and then you get the jumping hammer fist or an elbow that comes in thereafter. Can't be good for the longevity in the sport. So well done on the ref stepping in as quick as he did. But yeah, don't know, he needed something like that. He needed to, because he is such a talented fighter. He really, really is. And this keeps him fresh. It makes him look dangerous. And I'm really glad that he's getting back on that winning form, and we'll see him back in with some bigger names again, I'm sure, in no time at all.
Mate, for me, they've got to put it. They've got to put Danny straight back in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Put him in against someone else, because he's got a bit of momentum.
Yeah, he's fresh. I think we could quite possibly see him fight in the next month.
Absolutely.
Ryan
Spann, ranked number 13, defeated Misha Serkinov, ranked number 11, with a TKO in 1 minute 10 seconds. So these fights are not lasting long. Luckily for us, as we are lasting long.
Yeah, Spann looked good. I think he looked really quite sharp. Yeah, he did look sharp. And, there wasn't a lot to talk about in it, really. The big guys sitting down on their punches somewhat. But, Spann got the crunching number in, and it was a pretty convincing performance. I mean, we can't take a lot from it because we didn't see them wrestle up in any convincing way. We saw obviously no groundwork. It was just on the feet, and he caught his man early. He's clearly got a lot of power. We know guys up at that weight do have. But he looked pretty precise with his striking. He looked good. He looked convincing. And he got a nice, quick, easy win. It's another one that could potentially get put back in there quite quickly, as long as there's an available and viable opponent for him.
Yeah, I think, you should take advantage of the fact that these guys have had not much time in the cage in terms of damage and things like that. Let's get them back in, get while they're on the back of a big win, and build their momentum, I think. But unfortunately, I don't make the decisions, my friend. But next up was the main event. Leon Edwards, number 3, waited 18 months to fight. Bilal Muhammad took in at short notice, ranked number 13. It's his first ever main event. In the first round, Leon Edwards was warned about an eye poke. Accidental eye poke, nonetheless. He was warned. The second round, 18 seconds in, he catches Bilal Muhammad right in the eye. It was a nasty eye poke.
Yeah.
And sadly, you could tell straight away that by the scream of pain that he was not getting up from that.
Yeah, there was no acting antics on Bilal's part when the eye poke happened. And it was an unusual type of eye poke in that it wasn't defending an entry for a takedown where the hand extended. It wasn't a punch or trying to push away a strike coming. It was actually because he was throwing up a kick that the finger went in the eye. But it was horrible. Obviously, really did. I just hope Bilal's all right because this guy's got a lot of potential to make big waves. I think he was just on the cusp of making big things happen for himself in that division. I just hope this eye poke has not done any extensive damage where it affected his career because, eyes, you're going to need 2 of them.
Yeah,
Dustin got away with it somewhat, didn't he? But, it's not a good idea to have eye trouble. But Leon Edwards, if we actually just take the performance for what performance was, Leon Edwards, he looks so good. He's so up there. I really think he could potentially be the next title holder. He's looking good. His wrestling's all on point.
Sharp, didn't he?
I feel like sometimes he was shooting in when he didn't have to, when he was having so much success with the striking. I would have liked to have seen him continue to strike in, but he was clinching up, and I think that's just become his style. I think he strikes effectively and he just likes to clinch up. He's a true MMAist in every stretch of the word, that he wants to express each and every area that he's got in his repertoire. But he does look so good. He's just looking so calming. And Bilal is not a nice prospect to come up against you. You pretty much know you're going to be in for a hard night. But he seemed to be making himself look so calm in there that he wasn't flustered by who and what he was up against. Leon Edwards totally believes in himself. And the more I watch him, the more I believe in him also. I know we've always been banging on about him. It's like we're almost advocators for him and advertisers for him. But he does impress me. He's going to be, I believe, champion. I think he could do it. I really do with what I'm seeing. But what a setback with the eye poke. I don't know what happens from here now. Do they get that one back on? I just don't know.
Leon Edwards said after the fight he doesn't want to run it back. He feels he showed enough in the first round that he thinks that he should just be in the title picture.
He's got a good argument.
It's difficult though, isn't it, when you've only had one round against your opponent to say, especially when you haven't won, to then say, well, I don't need to run that back. I think it's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a little bit cheeky, but they also haven't been giving him the respect and the opportunities that he perhaps deserves. So maybe he feels in a little bit of a rush to get his opportunity in. I think they should give him the opportunity. I do really do.
I do. I think he should have been in the title, but he should have. This fight should have been a title fight anyway. For me, but I also believe that they'll probably run this back. And I think they. You can't really argue with that. But I do think Leon Edwards showed enough. He is the real deal.
He does look good. He does look good. So sharp.
All round as well.
Yeah, sharp. And like I say, it's that calmness. He just wasn't emotionally invested in any way. He was just playing the game and playing the game really, really well. If he was going to be a poker player, you wouldn't be able to read anything from his face expression. He was just letting all his expression being done with his hands and his legs and his movement. And come on, give this guy an opportunity. I want to see if he can do this or not and take it all the way. I believe he can.
Yeah, it's frustrating, mate, isn't it? Okay, let's round this up. It's been a long one, but I feel blessed. We had two fantastic guests. We had Brad Wharton, Cage Warriors commentator, previewing the Cage Warriors Trilogy with us, and he's the real deal. He's so good at his job, excellent commentator, but so prepared. So every fight we threw at him, proper analysis and preview of it, just off the cuff, sensational stuff. And then we had the featherweight #1 contender in Jordan Vucenic, who fights for the title next week. Guys, subscribe, youtube.com/A.C.E Podcast Nation. Click that bell for notifications. And of course, you can get the audio versions everywhere else. Subscribe to the Danny Batten Fight Show at Danny Batten FS on Instagram and Twitter. Hit us up. Tell us who you'd like to see on the show. And obviously, you can always send questions for Danny or for the guests. But we'll be back next Wednesday, 8 o'clock, for another episode of the Danny Batten Fight Show. And we'll be talking Cage Warriors Trilogy as well as the UFC. It's going to be a very interesting show. Danny, I'll see you in 2 weeks, my friend.
Yes, absolutely, Si. Yeah, it has been a really good one this week to have Jordan on, the future Cage Warriors Featherweight champion, and to have Brad on was just absolutely awesome. And always a pleasure to share my Sunday evening with you, Si. It's been a good one.
Top man. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Guys, I'll be back with special guests over the next couple of weeks as Danny's away with the first Cage Warriors Trilogy, and then he's off to the American places to hopefully get Modestus back on the winning track. But we'll be back next Wednesday. Join us. Spread the word. Tell your people. Danny Batten Fight Show is where it's at. Cheers.
Defending champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Drop, you can't ignore it. I'm transforming now these cars and planes, I'm always boarding. Just out touring down in Charlotte like